All right, there's a pretty shady character that's been running around the show, so we want to go over there and check this guy out.
Hello everybody, Michael Payne here for the Antique Bowie Knife Association. We're here in Natchez, Mississippi, the weekend of the sandbar fight, displaying our wares for the public. And I thought I'd give you my presentation of the 10 knives associated to James Bowie historically. We will start this process with the bad stuff first. In 1950, a movie was released in the United States after a 1949 novel called The Iron Mistress. It's a story of Jim Bowie in New Orleans for one summer and the knife that supposedly made him famous. This knife is the Iron Mistress, and it's the first knife that ever associated anything brass back with Jim Bowie. This knife is the knife that confused most Americans. Most Americans think of a big clip point as being what a Bowie knife is, and the reason is because of this knife. Now, the movie called it the Iron Mistress. I call it the root of all evil. From that evil came these evils. These are the three most historic frauds in history. The first one here is the Juan Seguin knife. A gentleman by the name of Frank Latham found this knife in Mexico City on vacation about 1930. He bought the knife, brought it home, and donated it to the Texas Ranger Hall of Fame. Texas Ranger Hall of Fame presented this knife as Jim Bowie's knife for a couple of decades before they had it tested. When they tested it, there's a maker's mark on the blade right here made of silver. Well, there was two problems with that. The knife claimed to have been made by Daniel Searles, and Searles used gold for his maker's marks, and this was silver. And when they tested the silver, it was from alloy not available till the 1920s. Next to come along was the Bart Moore knife. This knife, the Bart Moore family said that their uncle, Sheriff James Moore, in 1860, took this knife in as a $5 payment for a debt. On the knife, you can't read it, but it's scribed J. Bowie on this side. On the back side, on the ricasso right here, there is an acorn with JB inlaid or scratched into the symbol to represent James Black. Well, we know today this is not a black knife. Nothing like a black knife. In fact, this is really Spanish design, kind of Moorish, Spanish Moorish design knife. So I suspect the knife originated in Mexico via some Spanish heritage. The next fake to come along is the one that's probably the most well-known and probably the worst fake, in my opinion, that ever happened, and that's the Joe Musso big brass back knife. This knife first appeared in 1972 in a photo. I didn't bring it, son of a gun. Of a lady named Polly at a antiques dealer's table holding the knife. This was 6 years before Joe Musso found the knife. When Joe Musso bought it, the person he bought it from said it was found in an antique dresser acquired in San Antonio. Well, you know now, this knife was made in England in the 1970s, and there's probably 7 or 8 dozen of these known around. Then from the fakes, we come into those knives that we don't know about. These are knives that are mentioned in history, in tabloids, in newspaper articles and such. And the first one I'll talk about is the Juan Padillo. According to Juan Padillo, Jim Bowie gave him the knife Padillo was a pirate that worked for Lafitte that followed Bowie to Texas. According to Padillo, there's 2 notches in one side for the men he killed with the knife, and 3 notches on the other side for the Indian scalps that he took with the knife. Of course, we do not believe this knife to be actual, but this is my representation based off of an article that was written in the Honeycomb Review in 1902, but the original article goes back all the way to the 1880s. It talks about the Juan Padillo. The next knife up is my representation of a knife made by Lovell Snowden. Now, we talk about Searles and we talk about Fitzpatrick making a knife for Bowie, but James Bowie's oldest brother, John, said that Lovell Snowden made the sandbar knife, and this is my representation of it. Now, all these knives have been lost to history, so we don't know what they look like. And the last in the fables is what I put in for the Noah Smithwick knife. Noah Smithwick said Jim Bowie came to his shop asking for a replacement for the sandbar knife so that he could retire it. And he said it wasn't much of a knife, it was a 10-inch blade, but he had it refitted in ivory and silver. Well, Noah Smithwick wouldn't have made anything in ivory and silver in San Felipe, Texas in 1830, so I put stag on it instead. But it's basically a Searles style blade with a stag handle. Another knife that was lost to history and we have no idea what it looks like. Then we finally get into the real knives. If you read the articles on the sandbar, it talks about a butcher knife. Well, Reason, in a rebuttal to the famous PQ articles of 1886, said that the knife that Jim used was a knife that he made for Jim from a farrier's file. It was 9 1/4 inches long, it was 1.5 inches deep, and it was 1/4 inch thick straight back. And that pretty much fits the description of it. Now, this has been lost to history, but we do have one very similar, except 12 3/4 long, that's owned by our president of the Antique Bowie Knife Association, called the Forest knife, which is very much like this, other than being longer, and it has a finely checkered handle. So this knife and the one that our president had is the 2 best candidates we have for the sandbar. The next knife associated to the Bowie family, and it is and it isn't, is Bowie number 1. It is believed to be made by James Black. It's of James Black style, and there on the escutcheon plate is written Bowie number 1. Now, we don't know what Bowie number 1 means. It could be a model number. It could be the first knife made for one of the Bowies, or it could be fake that somebody put on after the fact. We just don't know. The next knife in the line is a truly James Black made knife. This is kind of a Kerrigan style, smaller version. Silver wrapped tang and ricasso in totally black construction. Now I've got this one as the Sea of Mud knife, which was likely recovered from either the Alamo or Goliad during the Revolution and then lost on the Sea of Mud trail when the Mexicans retreated back to Mexico. So that would be what this knife looked like when it was new. And then last but not least, well actually next to last but not least, is the Henry Huber cast steel knife. Now, this knife comes from the Maryland Bowie family, Berkeley Bowie in particular. He believed it to be Jim Bowie's, and a copy of a knife that he had Huber make for all of his men in Texas. However, we've not found a single one, but we found dozens of Henry Hubers that are very similar to this, with various stag handles. And I said last but not least, because this is the original Bowie knife.
That's the problem.
In 1826, a full year, well, in April of 1826, about 8 months before the sandbar fight, Jim Bowie walked into Bailey's Tavern in Alexandria, and there sat Norris Wright, who had been lying about him while he was gone to Arkansas. Well, he came back in and he hollered, "Wright, is it true? Are you the one telling the lies?" Norris Wright stood up, drew a pistol from his waist pocket, and fired at Bowie. Well, Bowie had picked up a chair to hold in front of him, but the bullet went through the chair. The ball hit either coins or a medal on his pocket and deflected off, broke one of Bowie's ribs. Well, Bowie charged Norris Wright, knocked him to the ground, and held him down with one hand, and with the other hand in his mouth tried to open the clasp knife, but was unable to get it done before they knocked it out. So he reached over and he bit Norris Wright on the index finger, leaving a tooth and bleeding profusely. So if you get really technical, the original Bowie knife, as in Jim Bowie used in a fight, this would be the original knife. Of course, this is a pruner, it'd be a straight blade, but the same concept.
Very nice. Well, thank you very much for the presentation.
Well, let me show you something else before you leave.
Sure.
Then I can go on to my original knives, my authentic knives. And within my case over here, I have a variety of various 19th century knives and a little tableware over there, but this is my pride and joy. This is the only known, almost complete set of Tiffany made knives from 1880s to 1914. We have a clip point, a spear point, and then the Skinner's bag. I am still looking for a pouch, an ammo pouch, and the shafts. And I get that, I have pretty much the complete collection of what will be available.
These are awesome. So these are what a genuine Tiffany mark looks like, not those round Tiffany New York
No,
circular stamps that
this
you
is
see.
the real deal. This is what the Tiffany knives look like.
Yep.
Now, the only exception may be the Roosevelt knife, which is a
Well,
fancy
that's a whole
silver.
different category.
Yeah,
there.
that was a custom-made knife, but of Tiffany's retail business, this was their hunting set. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next year.